Good afternoon, good morning, no matter where you are around the world. My name is Karen Griffith. I'm an inner freedom and embodiment coach. I coach around all things to do with wellness, happiness, and mental fitness. I help women to go from overwhelmed, confused, stressed, anxiety, to living a life of calm and freedom, and hopefully fulfilling their purpose. So here we are. As promised on my Facebook, I said I would deliver a few ideas for those looking to make significant or steps towards, or even a starting place, a place to look, as I sometimes call it, to improve their well-being. Because ultimately it's about choosing. But what we're choosing could be either conscious or unconscious. I have mentioned it a bit on previous lives. I'm not going to go into this one because I'd rather get into some ideas to work with, ideas to try on, see which lands, see what resonates. As always, not everything is meant to fit. That's okay. I find, as a rule of thumb, I just take one idea away, work on that, and then see what is next to implement. You know me, I like to sip on my herbal tea. So I've made a few notes about the things that I wanted to discuss. But imagine having, a life where you're going for the things you really want, the things that matter to you, the things that you really enjoy. And part of that is making sure that you are well and firing on all cylinders. And what I mean by that is wellness is the whole self, the emotional, physical, mental, spiritual. I've also included financial, because I think given the state of affairs, I would urge everyone to really reconsider their wellness from a financial point of view, and also to consider what is meaningful for them so they can start to make choices that are better aligned with the life that they're interested in pursuing, rather than something led by something else, usually fear-based. Because something I read the other day was, and it's very true, if you do not choose, it will be chosen for you. I say again, if you do not choose, it will be chosen for you. You just may not be present to the ways it shows up. I know, as I became a life coach 3 years ago and done a lot of internal work which has manifested or created a lot of outcomes, not all of them favourable, but more in line with the person I was becoming and wished to become. I say this from this point of view. I didn't realise how much I was on autopilot and how I needed to take myself off. So going back to the point I'm trying to make, if you're living a life full of vibrancy and vitality, which I believe I'm at that place now after quite a few setbacks along the way, and that's okay. These things that I'm sharing with you are things that I've personally road tested myself. I still implement them. It's also what I coach around. I also teach the stuff. If you've watched my lives before, you can attest to that. If you've watched them and digested the content, perhaps shared it with your loved ones or anybody that you think that needs help and support and not ready to have a conversation with me, and that's okay. I like to think that I'm on hand for those that are ready, serious about making the changes that would make a significant impact to all areas of their life. That said, I'm going to dive straight in because I mentioned on this, it was MMA, and one of them was your feelings will fluctuate, and it's true, they can be fleeting, and this is where it's useful to have a conscious or presence to how you show up, and also how you show up in particular in times of challenge. So what I would invite you to do, and if you follow my stories, you'll see that I post quite a bit about letting go. I'm also going to add another bit of language to you that you might want to consider: surrender, let go, letting go. The reason being that, I'm 50 years old. I'll share myself an example, and a lot of what I'm being invited to let go of are outdated beliefs, goals, decisions that I made that no longer fit, no longer work, no longer supportive of where I'm heading, the direction I want to go in, and what's meaningful to me. And that had to include people, places, things. So it's an ongoing process. And the invitation, if you want to start moving forward, because on this channel, what things I talk about, it's always motion forward, movement forward, and taking committed, consistent action. And you can't do that if you're weighed down with the things that are no longer important, not relevant, or they're things that you've taken on as yours, and actually they're other people's stuff or things or situations or events. And I'll touch a bit on this, maybe traumatic, big T's, little T's. Anybody that knows me well enough would have seen, if they follow my profile, there was a time when I was running workshops around trauma, because this is probably a subject where we're getting better informed on how that looks like, and I don't want to go stuck there. Just to let you know, it's an area where I'm going to be upskilling myself, becoming more trauma-informed, so that can translate to the people I help, because increasingly when I speak to women, sometimes men, there has been a few clients that I've had in the past, it's acknowledging stuff that's happened, sometimes from our childhood, that we are still acting from that place in our adulthood. And for me, again, as I'm 50 years old and where I'm at, I had to let go of so much stuff that was ruminating, recycling. So how did I work on those things? Because the things I talk about is internal, external. What I mean by that, the work that you do is, and the work I feel called as a coach to support, and also to keep on reinforcing to anybody that watch my lives, is to do the inner work for it to show up on your external circumstances. Because your reality, your present reality, the one, if you're truthful and honest about what that looks like, is a manifestation of, or a creation of, what's going on inside of you. Once you get that, get your head wrapped around it, it becomes a bit easier for you to recognise, I'm the common denominator, so the things I can control, are my thoughts, my beliefs, my behaviours, my actions, how I'm responding or reacting, my impulsivity, my reactivity. And these are all the things that I'll be covering today in this live before I go to bed. So one of the things I did today, this evening, this is why I'm running a bit later than planned, was somatic yoga practice. So it's a bit of breath work and yoga practice. So I'm just sharing it as an idea to try on. However, something else I actively encourage is breath work. It's not for everyone, admittedly, because there's some things that will resonate, others don't, and I get that. But I would encourage you to consider breath work a way of releasing emotions, because feelings come about from emotions, and emotions come from the thoughts of thinking. And a few lives ago, and certainly more recently, I started, because of the journaling practice that I have, I started to notice how much I was ruminating on particular things that weren't helpful, that weren't serving me. And when I started to work on breath work, I noticed, because it's the invitation to bring up things. I'm going to say something that I've said on my socials, but not necessarily on my lives. You need to name it to tame it, feel it to heal it. I'll say it again, name it to tame it, feel it to heal it. The reason why I like that, because it reminds me in the moment, particularly when I'm handling or feeling that onslaught or the rise of difficult, challenging emotions, that it's temporary, it's fleeting, it will pass. So breathwork is a way of accessing safety in my body whilst I'm experiencing something challenging or difficult in the moment. So I'm going to suggest 5. I mean, I normally suggest 3 deep belly breaths, but as a practice, the suggestion is to breathe in for a count of 5, hold for a count of 5, breathe out for a count of 5, hold for a count of 5, breathe in for a count of 5, hold for a count of 5, breathe out for a count of 5. So it's a slow release, hold for a count of 5. So you start to get this sort of going. It doesn't need to be long. I mean, I do what is available for me at the time. I try and do 10. If I'm blessed with a lot of time, I'll go for the 20 minutes, half an hour. I've done breath work for over an hour with trained practitioners. And I find it's very useful to then journal around what comes up for me as a result of what I'm experiencing. So today, because we had somatic breath work as well as yoga practice, and it was really the extension, really getting into all areas of the body, including the toes, I discovered with the hip openers, I started to get angry, I started to experience anger. So I'm going to be processing what came up for me as a result, and I call it Rage on the Page. And it's a way of being cathartic. It's a cathartic exercise, which, again, the surrender, let go is the release. So try those as a process. So another bit of the memo was sort of like, your wellbeing matters, and it does. Your health is your wealth, and too often I meet and I have had, experiences where the warning signs were there about prioritisation of what mattered, and often it's caregivers, women that I work with, and they're prioritising everybody else apart from themselves, and the impact of that is burnout. And burnout, if you ever experienced it, I know I have done several times, takes months to recover, and even then it's really difficult because you're caught in an influx. And the reason why I'm so passionate about what I do is I don't want you to get to that stage that I did, the burnout, the stress, the anxiety, or even the depression, because that's happened to me too. So the things or the tips, processes, action steps that I'm sharing with you are ones that are intended to not get you to that point, because when you get to that point, these things don't tend to work. You need significant support because you're in crisis, and that's what I'm trying to help women to avoid and steer them into a better place of guidance, of tapping into their inner resources and understanding that they don't need to do it all unless that's what they want. But if you choose differently, you can experience life full of vitality and vibrancy and going for what you want and getting energised by it, so your cup's full and people get to experience you from the overflow. Not all of it, because some of that still belongs to you, because what I'm experiencing, have experienced, and I've started to boundary up, so to speak, is that people have some sort of entitlement access. And I get it, because the thing with social media that we need to be present to, I believe, is the fact that it's made us all instantly accessible. But that's not always a good thing. There are times when you need to shut down, you need to rest, you need to recover, you need to relax. And being accessible is not always a good thing. And I think given our worrying for doing, sometimes there's an expectation for us to expect certain things from people that's not necessarily realistic. So again, I'm going to move swiftly on to a suggestion that is routines, rituals, habits. I've got a support group, the link's available, so do check that out. There's plenty of resources, support there, or one-to-one consultation with me if you're having challenges getting started. That can and does happen, because there's things that could be in your way of doing the things that you know you need to do. And I'm going to go on to 4 chemicals, happiness chemicals, natural, and they're super beneficial in keeping your mood regulated, so that you experience mood elevator, but in a way that's natural. Also helps keep you calm, nervous system regulation, helps with pain. We do experience pain in ways that it can be cathartic to exercise it out. Also to have our hormones in check. Now that I'm 50 and I'm menopausal, my moods, my hormones, my health, that is, I do pay attention to. So there's things that I do, but as a guide, a starting place, the happiness chemicals, I've mentioned this before, it's always useful to run through these things again because repetition is key. Oxytocin, which creates safety, intimacy and trust. So one of the things I do when I wake up is just to hug myself. It's just a little thing, and that's your oxytocin then. If you've not got pets, they're great, for that emotional support. endorphins, exercise, painkiller, natural painkiller. I like to practice yoga first thing in the morning. If I can, I'll do some strength training or some cardio or some yoga practice. Keep the body shape. I mentioned the body is made to move. So as I get older, I appreciate being in shape. I appreciate having a body that is still in good shape. I intend to live for a long time. I intend to make the most of my life. I want to enjoy all that there is to offer in the buffet of life, and I can't do that if I'm not well. So exercising is key for me. I tend to do it in the morning. I tend to start front loaded on Monday. I do all the hard stuff early in the week, so by the time it gets to the end of the week, it's more about relaxation, yin yoga practice, stretching, nourishing my body. Serotonin. Serotonin is like getting out in the sun, vitamin D. What else is serotonin? Very useful as a mood. Often when we experience low moods, it could be depleted serotonin levels, and it's also important to eat the right sort of foods to assist in the serotonin or the maintenance of, so that you don't feel tapped out. I call it tapped out. So this means counterbalance. So if you're doing things like drinking excessive amounts of alcohol, that's going to have an impact on your serotonin levels. So what I would offer, and I'll go into this later, is that consider maybe reducing alcohol intake, anything that is not actually serving you, even if it's by 1%, 1 glass less per week. Make significant changes, like maybe stop bringing it to house, maybe one day or less week you go out, or you don't, you go non-alcoholic, whatever works for you. And another happiness chemical I'm going to finish off with is dopamine. Now this is the one that I've put a big circle around because it's the reward chemical, which is great. This is the to-do list. However, I will just urge you to consider where you're sourcing your dopamine. One of the things I've done, because I've been tracking it recently, is to reduce my screen time, particularly on my phone, and I've successfully done that. I say successfully, now it's about consistency. I've managed to reduce it week on week. I've got a goal, there's still a bit further to go, but I've significantly, because I was quite shocked by the amount of time I was spending on my phone. So there's certain things, practices that I do to keep that in check. The reason being, social media is one of those that lends itself to dopamine. I'm going to mention it because I know I do have men and women watching my content. Porn being the other one is significant to mention, and it could be men and women, don't get me wrong, but it's dopamine and it's the sense of doing something, but actually are you? Like scrolling is a clear example. And I know I used to be a scroller. I used to spend a significant amount of times on Facebook, social media. What I realised was it was impacting my mental health. And when I started to use it less and more intentional, I got mentally better. So it also meant, because I'm going to go on to this later, because I replaced the habit. I was getting my reward source from elsewhere, i.e. reading, and learning new things. And that's when I realised I still had a bit further to go with my screen time, but it was important for me to maintain, because it was known for me, I didn't feel so compelled to, this is our hard wiring, the competition, the comparison, I'm not where I thought I'd be, and seeing things on Facebook that wasn't supporting or helping me. And when I started to remove those, that to a degree meant unfollowing people, blocking, removing them from my friend list because we weren't aligned. It didn't mean that I didn't like or support them. And I know there's people that done the same to me, blocked, removed, whatever. If it works for you, that's fine. But what I'm saying is these are things you should consider doing. So should you? You might want to consider if you want to get vibrancy, vitality in your life, because you're not being suckered down by stuff that's irrelevant, crap, doesn't matter, not relevant, take from it what you will. So, to the sexy stuff. So, fuel your passion. How do we do that? I think I'm going to think, and then I'm going to go into the feeling thing. I think a way of looking at your passion is to reflect on your childhood and the things that brought you joy, not focus on a goal, not focus on any particular outcome, because that's what it was when we grew up. We just had fun. We created our own fun. It had nothing, we if you're Gen X, you didn't grow up with computer games, things like that. You had to create your own fun. As long as it was out, daylight, the world's your oyster. So think about your childhood pursuits. One of mine was dancing. I started from an early age, 3 years old. I've returned to that, and I've also added other dance classes, experiences, like whacking, which I really enjoy. My dance teacher for whacking, she's going to be performing at Glitterbox. The reason why I mention it in Glasgow is because I then realised what was possible. So, and because I go to Glitterbox in Croatia, which I absolutely love that event. And they had a competition there. I didn't enter. I observed some of it, and I got inspired. And before that, I was thinking about returning to ballet. It had been, several months, because it took me some time to find somewhere to attend the classes, and then I just got it organised, started going to class. You may have seen some of my videos. The point being, that fueled other things. Like I started to, prior to that I was learning a language, Portuguese, which I intend to go back to. I fell off that habit because I've got a goal in mind with that is. But there's also it's not outcome, I'm just going to see what happens with it. But I've got other things, hobbies that I've got stuff for that I've started. I'll just say explore it. So, me, Kaizen, continuous improvement, it's a Japanese sort of philosophy or a train of thought. So I'm going to the feeling, and when you do something consistently, and I invite you to do the 1% improvement every day, 15 minutes per day, and just checking with yourself, how does it make you feel? Are you getting pleasure? Are you enjoying it? Is it making you feel a certain way? What are those feelings? You know, would you do it again? Is it okay if it's not for you? Treat it like a buffet. You can't eat everything on it. It's not possible. What is possible, try a little bit, maybe try a little bit more. See what happens. See what exploration can go on from that. You know, I've got like music. I love music. I'm fortunate I'm going to get the opportunity to play whilst I'm out in Croatia. This is play other people's music. And I'm really excited about that. And again, you know, I'd always loved music, and I used to sort of do the recording back in the day, you know, radio stations, Kiss FM and that. But the reason why I bring it up is that was, my love of music and my love of dance turned into, okay, let me learn to play other people's music. So again, it's fueling the passion, see where it I had no idea it would lead where it led, but it did. And I'm also thinking about other things, and yeah, so a place to reflect on your childhood pursuits, maybe take 5 to 10 minutes, write it out, see what comes up for you, keep thinking about it, feeling into it, see what sits, talk to a few people if you're having difficulty accessing the memories. I reckon you've got a hidden talent there that might be worth exploring. Okay, so I'm going to finish off now with the memo also said your worth stays constant, and that's true. And I'm going to shout out a few words, but there's one thing I want you to home in on in particular. Self-love, self-esteem, self-leadership, particularly self-leadership. And self-leadership, I want you to consider all the things that I shared as ideas as a means of thinking of universal laws that you may be familiar with or maybe not. And if you've got habits, maybe unhealthy habits, I know I've got quite a few, I'm still working through some, others I've managed to cut out, which is good. Yeah, taking the judgment out, this is, it's good from the sense of I've been able to put it into something else, which is the law of replacement. So I mentioned scrolling on Facebook. I now read a lot more, and I've built up that habit and I've got it consistent, and I'm on target for what I said I would do each year for book. I wasn't far off. I think I missed my target by 2. I'm totally on track. I'm really enjoying, I've really opened up and even reading books that I hadn't anticipated I would. But the point is, the law of replacement is, if you maybe smoked, the invitation is, could you maybe think about going out for walks? Or maybe could you think about, I'm trying to think something related but not, something else that when you get the impulse, maybe read, maybe learn a new skill, something to take your mind, something with your hands maybe, like make candles or knit, things like that. The law of replacement, you get catching my drift. Another one in terms of self-leadership is law of karma. I have mentioned on other lives law of karma because it came up in one of the books, Outwitting the Devil. And it's do no harm to self or others. And what I've recognised in my experience, that my karma comes around quicker and quicker every time. So when I do something that I shouldn't, I'm not shitting myself, but, something that, was reactive, impulsive, didn't really consider fully the impact it would have on others. It's almost instant, and I'm glad. And I would invite you just to recognise that we all have an impact on the people that we connect with, even if they're not people that we regularly interact with. So because I read this somewhere, and also something that I wrote down, to leave someone better than how I found them. Because for me, it's always kindness, and it's always from the place of being authentic in my expression, and not in a way that depletes me or hurts them, as best I can. It's not always possible. I'm still learning. There's a lot of things I've had to unlearn, and recognise in myself that I've had impact on others, which is probably why things have gone the way they have done. And it's then a case of extracting the lesson, extracting the learnings. What can I do differently? And when I recognise patterns, to work on those, because ultimately I want to leave people better than how I found them. But that doesn't mean to say, for those that like to take and not give, for me there needs to be equanimity, there needs to be balance. And my karma is, for me, if I want to operate in healthy interdependent, not codependent, sorry, that was a bad choice of words, interdependent, equanimity, reciprocal friendships and relationships of any kind, intimately or otherwise, there needs to be a healthy, and I have some values attached to those. And the reason why I share this is karmic, is that I need to show up and be those things for me to expect that of others. And I'm more likely to attract those into my experience. And that's certainly been happening, because I've had wonderful news today that I wasn't expecting, that I'll get to experience when I'm in Croatia next week. I'm seeing the fruits of my labour, of the internal work, really sort of holding myself accountable and responsible for my choices, choosing differently, taking radical, I've lost my train of thought, radical something, hold that. Anyway, so then I'll move on to the last bit, which is shadow work. I'm just going to touch it because I'm learning a lot, and I'm going to be sharing more as I go on in my lives. And shadow work, if you're new to it, what is it? It's, I would say, you got light, you got darkness, dark, and there is aspects of you or me that are not so nice. I say nice, not so, some of it's conscious, some of it's unconscious. I think the best way to look at it is it's survival patterns from childhood that has turned, in some respects, overplayed strengths and ultimately don't serve you. But that said, they could be still useful in creating from. What do you mean, Karen? So for me, I've recognised, once I accepted it a bit more with some of the hardwiring, that I can be competitive. It's not always going to be for everybody that experienced me, you know, that Karen that can be like that. So I've decided, how can I channel it into something purposeful, meaningful, that I can benefit and maybe others. So I've started to think along those lines. Another one is I've experienced a lot of anger and also grief without sharing too much detail. But what I've decided to create instead, from that place when it comes and it arises from me, is ways I can be kinder, more compassionate for myself, for the experiences that I had that weren't favourable, sometimes out of my control, but to acknowledge what they created, that I have now a choice of changing, shifting, so I can just channel it somewhere. So again, I use it as inspiration to share, and that is going to be why I'm going to raise boundaries, because I know for me a big piece is for when boundaries get crossed for me, I find it really disrespectful. So I've had to do some channeling the last few times it happened. It was recently, last week, you know, another set of circumstances, and I advocated for myself in a way that I wouldn't have done a few years ago. So I was going to be like patting myself on the back for that. I got the outcome that I desired. You know, I wasn't attached to it. I was okay either way. But the boundary breaker did get to experience me showing up for myself and also advocating for my needs. And I felt very good as a result of the work that I did to get to that stage. So I would encourage you to think about shadow work as a way of uncovering aspects of yourself that maybe you've hidden away, suppressed, denied that was there, and to find ways to integrate it, which is what I'm doing. That's why I'm an embodiment coach, part the other aspect, because I get people into action, I take people into action. It's often simple, the things we need to do. I'm learning. We're all learning. We didn't come here with a manual. We may have come here with somebody else's manual, and I would invite you to spot those manuals that are not, you know, those programs that are no longer serving you, and update and upgrade with some new ones. Anyway, so I've spoken a lot. Hopefully you've got value. Do like, comment and share. I really appreciate it if you send me a message if you've got any takeaways. Share with me on this live, or maybe, you know, send me a DM if that's more comfortable for you to do so. You know, I'm also going to take a couple of weeks off. So I'll probably be back in 3 weeks' time. So I think I've given you more than enough to work with, some ideas and suggestions. I will be away. If I do respond, it will be delayed. It'll be a boundary. I'm going to advocate for myself. You know, I've been available because I've had it in the past where people decide to contact me on holiday and to a degree waste my time, which I value my time now. So I'm, you know, I'm available, but I'm not available 24/7. I do need my break. I do need my rest. Coaching, I love it, but it's also energetically an undertaking, especially the work I do on myself. So I respectfully say, if you're expecting a fast answer, it's not going to happen. There's still a bit of time, but next week, that's it. 3 weeks, I'm off. Anyway, much love. I hope you got value. Like, comment and share. I really appreciate their algorithms. I need support in that respect. I'll try and get something on YouTube this week. I did upload a video. It did go through, really annoying, and I was just sort of, So this is why I do lives on YouTube. So I recorded a video and it didn't upload. Whatever. Anyway, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. My name's Karen Griffith, and I'll catch you in 3 weeks' time. Goodbye.